Hello, listeners. It's Gunter here with some exciting news. We're on the lookout for sponsors to join us on our incredible journey with Inspired Change with Gunter. If your organisation cares deeply about meaningful conversations around masculinity, self development, and mental health, we'd love to partner with you. Our podcast has a wonderful, dedicated audience committed to personal growth and positive social change. By sponsoring Inspired Change with Gunter, your brand will connect with listeners who truly value thoughtful discussion and support initiatives that promote real transformation. We're incredibly proud to be ranked number one in Australia and number 5 in the USA on FeedSpot's top men's mental health podcasts to listen and follow in 2024. With an average of 50,000 downloads per episode each week from listeners all around the world, our reach is significant and growing. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to Miranda Spiegner Sapon, our showrunner and executive producer at miranda@noirtainment.com. We'd love to explore how we can work together to inspire change. Now, thank you for your continued support, and let's keep inspiring change together.
You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. I'm your host, and I'm going to follow on with something that I hinted in the last podcast on transference and countertransference and how this can impact on our relationship in the workplace. But before I go into the depth of that, I want to actually look at what masculinity, traditional masculinity in the workplace tends to look like and how we can shift the dynamics in that. You know, as a psychologist and as a therapist, there isn't a week where I don't see at least 2 to 3 people, maybe 4, whose basic issue isn't that they've got some dispositional anxiety or depression, but rather that their mental distress originates from stuff that's going on in the workplace. And we can talk about occupational stress, right? But I don't want to really do that at this point. What I'd like us to do is understand the foundation of a lot of this, because as you've picked up from my previous podcasts, if you've been a regular listener, and for those of you who haven't, my argument is that patriarchal ideologies underlie most of our institutions, whether that's corporation, politics, government, local government, or anywhere where we fundamentally come together as a group of people. This socialization has been so infused into how we behave in groups as well as individually that it has a profound, and I will say profound, negative impact on not just our relationships, but also what we achieve, or more precisely, what we don't achieve. So let me talk about in this podcast an overview of an understanding of how masculinity plays out in the workplace. Because at the moment, our workplaces, our community is generating psychological distress, but it's also generating physical illnesses in that context. We can't separate the two out. In fact, if I look at people who are in healthy, intimate relationships, they are fundamentally healthier overall, um, including on basic measures like, cholesterol and so on. And that healthiness extends our lifespan by around 7 years. And there's a very good study that's been done by Harvard in that regard. But let me not get sidetracked. So, in this podcast, I'm going to quickly talk about traditional roles, the masculinization of women in the workplace, issues about dominance and control, especially coercive control, and how we can transform these dynamics for the better. So let's dive into this. Okay, historically, workplaces fundamentally have been dominated by traditional masculine norms. So we're talking about, again, being territorial, being hierarchical, being acquisitional, being competitive, and being combative. And in that context, men and women who subscribe to the socialization in order to, in essence, compete within that framework or survive in it, uh, tend to be higher on indices of narcissism, lower in empathy, and particularly, um, you know, ambitious in an unhealthy way. In other words, you're going to climb the ladder of success by leaving debris behind, including, the proverbial figurative bodies. So these traits are often seen as strengths, unfortunately, and they fundamentally have shaped how we measure success and who gets ahead. However, these traits tend to lack any sort of emotional, authentic expression. Uh, we also then see in that context a massive reduction in collaboration. It's always the relationships are transactional and are based on, how you can progress. So often your own political or your own corporate career is more important than either the outcomes, the stuff that you're meant to produce within that environment, and the relationships that you're embedded with. So, for example, in dominant traditional masculine environments, we tend to see a reduction in job satisfaction. We tend to see, poor morale, an increase in absenteeism, an increase in what I call retributional claiming, which is fundamentally when people get to the point where they can't literally make themselves go to work anymore, and they begin to use the system like workers' compensation to get back at the system. Now, in a lot of cases, those people are legitimately psychologically, physically in distress. But they don't seem to be able to feel that they can initiate appropriate changes through the hierarchy in the workplace. The common thing that I get from people is, the senior management, the executives won't listen to us. Okay. And this has a profound impact. We're talking about culture, we're talking about leadership styles. So to have this context running, um, one of the things you've got as an employee is you either, conform or you challenge. Now, generally speaking, challenging just gets you more of the same, and they often turn up the heat. And they're often things what I call retributional behaviors when people are held to account according to, better policies and procedures. I see this when, managers have been investigated for harassment or for bullying or for coercive control. Unless they really come to the party and are managed themselves in a more to be more appropriate, they take it out on their employees. And so we've got the same, feedback loop of where people just fundamentally get burnt out. Now, burning people out is actually a highly expensive exercise. Okay. And I'm going to leave that for another time. So let me get on with this idea about what it is that happens, especially to women in a highly masculinized workplace. We can see that women have a choice in this. They either play the boys' game or they try to do it in their way. But unfortunately, neither of those approaches actually fundamentally work to any form of satisfaction. So let me talk about, what happens when women, adopt a traditional male approach to their work, to their, team building, to their leadership. And the thing that happens is that women then tend to become more assertive, but the men will interpret that assertion as being aggression. And so this is one of the first problems that emerges is that you play the game as a woman, but you still get then called out on it for being a ball buster. And, that locks you in. So where do you go with that? And so one of the effects of this for a lot of women is that they become more compliant, more biddable. So often they'll attach to who they see as being the most powerful person in the group. And again, there's no such thing as the alpha leader. So let's cut that out. So women then face a double standard. Now you also get that if you happen to be a male who doesn't conform to the traditional male role model or to the traditional expectation of what you should be as a bloke. So we begin to see that this double bind not only affects women's career trajectories, but also some men's. And it continues to reinforce harmful stereotypes. Not only that, but now what we're seeing is we're seeing a lack of diversity in leadership styles, especially healthy ones. And again, it perpetuates a very narrow view of what success actually looks like. My wife and I have been binge watching Game of Thrones and now House of Dragons, and I could apply what we see there, to some degree into lots and lots of organisations and corporations, and people are quite happy to justify why they're using this. So one of the key things in a hierarchical workplace structure that's particularly, patriarchal is we have issues of dominance and control. Now, it's not just control. There are levels of control that are necessary in a workplace. But what I'm talking about especially is coercive control, where there's manipulating, intimidating, and dominating behaviors by one person to control others and maintain their power. Now, this creates a highly toxic environment, and it really stifles creativity and growth because no one really is going to speak the truth. Now, coercive control can also be very, very subtle. Things like withholding information, micromanaging. And on the other hand, it can be really overt, like bullying and harassment. And this includes sexual harassment. And a lot of women fundamentally are loath to come forward because it can cost them, to a large degree, a career trajectory. So let's, in this time we've got left, talk about transforming the workplace to be more humanistic rather than, entrenched in patriarchy. So what we need to begin to do is we need to redefine leadership and success. And fundamentally, out of that, we need to remove the idea of status and prestige the way that we have attached ourselves to it. We need to emphasize qualities like emotional intelligence, social intelligence. We need to, emphasize inclusivity, and we need to focus on teamwork over and above traditional dominance. Teamwork, a flatter structure, where people, focus on cooperation, they focus on trust, they learn how to deal with conflict in an appropriate way because conflict can be healthy and stimulating. Um, and so that's really important. We need a commitment to the team and the organization. We need to have strong accountabilities, and we need fundamentally to be able to pay a laser focus to attention to results. Now, the person who came up with this particular model was a guy called Patrick Lencioni, and I think it's a really good, solid, rational foundation to build an organization on, because we are not dominated by the leaders, the people who are at the top as the CEO. We shine a light on them, and unfortunately we have over rewarded them financially and materially in the media. But you take that person out, and if you put the right people in place, the company will still run. But you take out the worker, the employee, the middle management, the senior, some of the senior managers who work with a solid leadership style, the company, collapses eventually. Who's going to make the widgets, right? Who's going to get things done? So the idea of simply being leadership to come up with ideas and, massage the bottom line so it looks good in the account books, it's not really the job. The job is bigger than that. So we need to emphasize a much, much more humanistic connection with each other in order to get rid of this toxicity. So what are some of the actionable steps that people can take? And I'm speaking to leadership here. If you own a company, run a company, then this is, basics 101. And, I don't accept but you're not in the real world. That's crap, right? We know this from research. So the first thing is, we need to promote emotional intelligence throughout the company, encourage leaders to develop and practice it. They need to understand their own emotions, and this is where I'll go back into the previous podcast. The person needs to understand the ghosts of their past so they don't bring them into their current relationships. They need to understand their level of self-esteem. They need to understand whether they have true confidence or whether it's a defense mechanisms because you've been narcissistically wounded. We need to champion diversity. Like in a team, if I've only got optimists on it, it's going to be like being on the Titanic that's sinking and everyone goes, oh, we'll just move aft. That's not underwater yet. The other part to this is that we really need to focus on strong training programs, but not just about, giving people well-being programs because everyone's in a state of distress. That doesn't get traction. We know that. Research tells us it doesn't get traction. We need to have stuff that gets embedded into the fabric of the organizational culture. They need to be not short hits that are discrete. They need to be integrated, continuing. Workshops and training sessions are fantastic, but they need to be supported by ongoing leadership and management processes, especially things like stuff on unconscious biases, inclusive leadership, and conflict resolution or management. All the employees need to be equipped with this stuff, not just certain sections of it. And that's where we're going to begin to see a change. We also need to encourage open dialogue. And I get frustrated often when I see, organizations that emphasize, oh, yes, we consult. Okay. So when you consult, with the employees, do you actually process that stuff that you get from the employees and put it into an actionable context? And a lot of times, the thing that I get from people is that, oh yeah, we get an employee satisfaction survey, or we get this sort of, quality assurance thing, and the leadership comes in, they have a chat, they go away, and nothing ever happens. That is not going to help in creating and sustaining a healthy work culture. And I don't care whether you're in politics, whether you're in local council, whether you're in a political party, whether you are in fact in a corporation or an organisation or even at a university. This stuff is critical. We're seeing, a process that's almost like a backlash to these principles, these humanistic principles, where, even in general, we're seeing this shift towards a form of fascism. There's a really neat book that I've been reading, which is actually quite disturbing in many ways, called Techno-Feudalism. And, how the planet's been subjected to, in nothing other than what I can call a scam. All right. So if you're interested in that book, please read it, especially if you are in business and you are either in the big business group and you need to take some ethical lessons out of this, or whether you're the little guy trying to figure out how to get the bank to give you some money because they're giving all the money to the big end of town. So the final thing in this is each and every one of us needs to model positive behavior. Leaders should model the behavior they want to see. So if you're, somewhat predatory, like there's been suggestions of Elon Musk, stop it. Get your hands off people. Be appropriate. Subtle things make a difference. It's exceptionally disrespectful to say to somebody, well, if you don't like the culture, leave. That is simply unacceptable. Now, fortunately, in many respects, we, especially in New South Wales, we have an organisation called Safe Work. They've instituted what's called psychosocial hazards. And in all honesty, if I would let inspectors whose focus is on that loose in many companies, those companies would be in deep, deep trouble. But that's going to take some time. So, yes, this is a serious calling people out, and it is a serious call to action. The Liberal Party in New South Wales again has come up in the last week with the fact that the current government, has bent over to their union bosses. We have unions because people get exploited when we don't. And we can't necessarily, as an individual, negotiate a fair deal with a company who has banks of lawyers. So we need, as employees, to strengthen ourselves. Now, part of being part of a union is not to abuse the system either. Unfortunately, what got a lot of unions a bad name was they were as bad as the other side of town and being corrupt and exploitive and completely unethical. So that needs to stop. If we're going to collectivise, we need to take a stronger moral position in this. And it's in that context where I go, if we do this, we're going to be more productive. We are going to be more profitable. Why? Because those areas of job satisfaction, morale, absenteeism, and retaliatory claims, those costs are going to reduce substantially. I've worked with C-suite executives who've been mercilessly bullied and harassed. Now, I'd estimate that to replace one of those would be in the vicinity of about $350,000 just to replace that person. Now, I don't care how big the business is. To me, and if it's not my money, I should be held accountable because that sort of expense is unnecessary and it's a waste. It's a waste of the person that we're losing, and it's a waste of the money that it's going to cost us to replace them. So, let me wrap up today's episode. Yeah, you might say I've been on a bit of a rant, but sometimes we need to do it. Remember that transforming traditional masculine values and culture in the workplace is a journey that requires commitment from everyone. By challenging those traditional norms, we support a healthier existence, a healthier workplace. And in that, we're fostering a culture of empathy and respect, where we create workplaces where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. So, to wrap it, let me thank you for joining me on Inspire Change with Gunter. Let's continue to work together towards creating more inclusive, equitable, and dynamic professional environments. So until next time, stay inspired, stay committed, and it doesn't matter at which level of the organization, buy into this, drive it, even when you think you don't have any influence. Make some noise, but stay inspired, stay committed, and keep striving for positive change in your environment, especially the workplace and beyond. This is me signing off. Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.guntersvoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda@noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at NOIRTAINMENT.com.